I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is Genesis Does, and what is the first book of the Bible? Genesis. So why don't we take a look at Bible adventures today? Or more specifically, Noah's Ark from Bible Adventures, released in 1995 by Wisdom Tree. Wisdom Tree is a company you may know from their baby blue NES cartridges that were sold exclusively in Christian bookstores. The reason why they were sold that way is because they were unlicensed games that Nintendo neither authorized nor wanted to exist on their console, and this was actually the second iteration of the company Wisdom Tree, originally called Color Dreams. They had the exact same problem getting their games into retail stores because those stores were afraid of reprisals from Nintendo, or if they carried unlicensed games, they wouldn't get shipments of legitimate games from Nintendo. So why would you take a risk for a Color Dreams game that may or may not sell very well when you wanted Super Mario 3 and Metroid and all those games that were official Nintendo games, and you wouldn't get supplies of them because you dared to break Nintendo's licensing arrangement? It wasn't worth it. Whereas when they rebranded as a biblical game publisher, and a lot of their games were just reskinned from Color Dreams games into Bible games, they figured, well, Nintendo's not going to go after these Christian bookstores, so these retailers will take the games even if other people won't, because they're not selling other hedonistic, violent video games. They're only going to sell biblical games, so they don't have to worry about not getting Nintendo games because they were never going to begin with. Once Wisdom Tree started having success with this arrangement, selling their games to Christian bookstores, they expanded from NES to other platforms. Naturally, that leads to what you see here, Noah's Ark, on this 3-in-1 Bible Adventures cartridge for Sega Genesis, but it's basically an iteration of a game they did on Nintendo with very minimal improvements to the graphics. I suppose technically we can consider this Genesis Does what Nintendo don't, because it's not on the comparable 16-bit platform. There's no Super Nintendo version of this. There is a Nintendo, but not a Super Nintendo version, so apples to apples, 16-bit to 16-bit, it doesn't compare. But when you compare the 16-bit to the 8-bit, it's not that much better. You'd think given the NES version came out in 1991 and the Genesis version came out in 1995, they would have learned a thing or two. But if you notice any screen tearing or glitches in this game, it's not the fault of my recording. It's the way the game is made. They had a basic competence in programming and were able to get so far with it, and that's about it. Like, for example, you'll notice that a horse gets stuck in the ground here. That's not the fault of emulation. It does that no matter which way you play this game. Play it on an original Sega Genesis, you're going to see that. Play it on the Analog Mega SG, you're going to see that. It's the way the game was made. Everything that looks wrong or bad here is the way the game was made. If you don't know the NES version of this, I'll explain it very briefly for you. You're trying to collect all the animals for the ark, 2 by 2, just like the Bible says, so that you can sail off with all of the animals of the earth before the Great Flood and save them from extinction. The game provides a helpful checklist, so each time you put one in the ark, it shows you which ones you haven't captured yet. And there are some interesting puzzles to catching certain animals. For example, the pigs are slippery and will just run away if you try to pick them up. So you have to lure them with food. You can find it in the trees and pick it up. And when you carry it around, the pigs follow you. And when you drop it, they start eating it, at which point you can pick them up. There's also a monkey that hides in the trees and throws nuts at you. So you have to pick up the nut it throws, and when it hits the ground, you throw the nut back at it. If you knock the monkey over, he flips upside down. Then you can pick him up and carry him back to the ark. So even with the bugs, even with the screen tearing and the limited amount of visual appeal here, there's a lot of brown, not any kind of parallax scrolling, no background music. It's pretty primitive, but at least I can say, I'm being somewhat generous by saying this, but there is some fun to be had here. If it wasn't skinned as a Bible game and it was just a game where you had to solve puzzles to collect animals, it would be the same game. There's nothing here inherently Christian that really makes this stand out as, oh, this is such an excellent game. It will teach my children true Christian values. No, I don't think they're learning that from this game. Even though they stuck proverbs on little stone tablets and you can pick them up and read them, I doubt that's really going to work. Kids are just going to gloss over that as fast as they can, and they just want to get all the animals in the ark as fast as they can. And so do I, for that matter. But to my dismay, when I did capture all the animals and I thought I was done, it gave me a brand new checklist and expected me to start over and do it all again. And at that point, I'd had my fill of Noah's Ark. It's like, fine, I solved your little challenges. I learned how to get the pig. I learned how to get the monkey. I learned where the snake was hiding. I did all these things. I even found the stupid cow. There was one cow on my checklist that just defied me as to where it was. And it was actually in the ark itself, on the very top deck of the ship. Like, why is the cow hanging out up there? And why didn't I just put it in the hold if it was already in the ark to begin with? But you ask logical questions in a game like this, and you're just asking for trouble. So you just pick up the cow and put it in the hold. It goes moo, and you put it in there, and you're done. But then you're not done, because it gives you a whole new set of animals you have to collect. And I said, no thank you, sir. I will not be doing that today. I appreciate your generous offer, but I have had my fill of Noah's Ark, because Noah's Ark is filled with all of the animals you asked me to get. So don't expect me to start over and do this whole shebang again, because today is not the day, I am not the one, and there are much better Sega Genesis games to play. Now don't get me wrong, this is far from the worst thing to exist on any platform, NES, Genesis, or otherwise. The graphics may be overly simple, the sound design may be overly minimal, but it is at least playable, it works, it's not completely broken. This isn't like the Action 52 on NES, where some of the games wouldn't even boot up and others were completely unbeatable. At least the game works and is a playable game. So if you're going to give Wisdom Tree credit for anything, give them credit for that much. It may not be great, but it works. And on that basis alone, I can quasi-recommend it. I'm not getting into depth on Bible Adventures today and playing the other two games, but you could argue there's value there with 3 different games, even though the 3 games have you completing the same objectives. It's the same game engine recycled 3 times to make 3 different games. So really you could consider it one game with 3 chapters if you wanted to. Well, you can call it 3 separate games. I don't care. It doesn't bother me one way or the other what you want to consider it to be, but if you get the gameplay of Noah's Ark, you already get the gameplay of the other 2 games, because you're going to be picking up stuff, carrying stuff, and taking stuff places. Whether it's a baby, or a goat, or a cow, doesn't matter. You pick stuff up, you take it places. At this point, the only other thing I have to tell you about it is how much it sells for. $32 loose, $140 complete, $265 new and sealed. And I can't fathom that. I would not pay that for this game, loose, complete, or otherwise. But if you're a Genesis collector and you have to have a complete collection, including unlicensed games, that's what you're going to be spending on Bible Adventures. But I more or less recommend that you play this in emulation, get your fill of it for a limited amount of time, then delete the ROM and move on to something else. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. This is Genesis Does. We have new content every day and new episodes of this series every Thursday, so stop in again and watch more content. We will always have something new here for you.